Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, in the United States, the Sikh community fights back against the Trump administration, hell-bent on removing key religious figures from their community. Well, a rallying cry is issued to support a new bill that will allow Gurdwara employees from Punjab to remain in the USA legally while they pursue a green card, instead of being unceremoniously kicked out of the US. And our theme of the Sikh community now having to stop relying on the state to protect it continues as two high-profile Khalistani prisoners in India issue a rallying call to the diaspora to start becoming more independent and to protect itself, particularly after the events in Hounslow last week. And on the same theme, Canadian Sikhs now realise they're being abandoned by their government too, intent on pursuing trade instead of protecting them. So the rallying cry echoes loudly across British Columbia to start standing up for the community more aggressively and, more importantly, more independently. All this and more on today's show. And, of course, at the end of the show, we'll have loads of your comments which have poured in beneath the videos, particularly after last week's show about Hounslow. So thank you for those. We'll take a long look at many of those at the end of the show. So let's get underway. And, yes, the first story that I want to cover today is the Religious Workforce Protection Act. Now, what is the Religious Workforce Protection Act? It comes amid concerns regarding America's Immigration Task Force, ICE. Now, the Sikh Coalition, this is, of course, is the organisation that tends to get heavily involved in these sorts of things, has joined together with various organisations to launch and support a new bill. And the bill would prevent the forced departure of, it gets a little bit detailed, I won't bore you with too much of the details, but basically it's the forced departure of R1 visa holder religious workers, and particularly Granthis. Now the Granthis, for those who might not know, they're the specialists who lead the prayers in Gurdwara. They read the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, the Holy Scriptures. Now, Sikh groups across the US are reporting accounts of harassment and abuse, particularly, obviously, at the hands of ICE. Now, I want to just give you a bit of an overview of what this act is. But first of all, you can yourself get involved in this. Listen to what this act is about and how it can help. But firstly, the Sikh Coalition joined forces with various organisations to try and push, again, I always talk about grassroots pressure, to push the grassroots into supporting this bill and getting a bit of pressure on the politicians in the US to push this bill through, because it is very important, particularly for diaspora workers. And they say, go along to our website. The website address there is there on screen. And there it says, tell your elected officials support this act. It's really important that you get your signature on the act. And there is a form to fill in. Visit the link, pick a campaign and enter your info. Of course, they have various campaigns going on. And press the sign up button. And what this will do is automatically sends a pre-written letter to your elected officials in Congress. So it's all the work's done for you. All you need to do is go along there and put your details in, and bang, away it goes. And you add your grassroots pressure to the politicians to change things. So what really in detail is it all about? Well, it's important. This Religious Workforce Protection Act, the RWPA, it's a bipartisan legislative proposal. That means it sits on both sides of the House. Both sides are supporting it on the whole. Introduced into US Congress. It's aimed at fixing a really critical bottleneck. That's a log jam, a hold up, a queue, let's say, in the immigration system that's holding up these green cards that affects particularly religious institutions. Now, the name does sound similar to other laws regarding general workplace discrimination, like, for example, the Workplace Religious Freedom Act. That's the one that allows you to wear your articles of faith. It's not that, it's different. This act focuses specifically on immigration and visa status for religious workers. So what is it? Well, the RWPA, it addresses this green card backlog for the EB4 visa category. That's the Special Immigrant Religious Workers. So this is the visa that if you're a Granthi or another important religious worker, this is the visa that you can specifically apply for that allows you to get into the United States. In some ways, it's actually a lot easier to get, and it allows you to get into the US a lot easier, bypassing other issues. Now, currently, for religious workers like Granthis and priests and ministers, it's for other religions as well, they can enter the US on a temporary R1 visa, which is capped at 5 years. However, due to these massive backlogs, it often takes much longer than 5 years for these workers to receive their permanent resident status, their green card. Now, under the current law, once the 5-year R1 cap's reached, these workers then have to leave the country because, the visa's expired, even if their green card application is still going. So they're stuck in the queue, but their 5-year visa's expired. But they can't do anything about it because they're still waiting for the US administration to catch up with the visa status. But they're then kicked out, even before their status has even had a chance to get through the queue. So you can see how unfair it is. Now, the RWPA then, if it goes through, would allow these workers to extend their temporary status while waiting for permanent residency, preventing forced deportation due to bureaucratic delays. We know that ICE obviously is completely black and white in this issue. If you don't have a valid visa, you're out. There's no in-between. Now, this is a sort of in-between status. Look, this is a status of, look, it's not my fault, it's your fault, it's your administration. I'm here legally, pending your bureaucratic problems. But ICE doesn't care. You're out. Your visa's expired. So this is designed to help avoid that ridiculous issue. This is one of those grey areas we talk about that sadly have been lost because of what's happened. Now, of course, it's a huge impact on the Sikh community in the US. For this community, this act particularly would be a really important positive step, particularly, of course, regarding the operation of Gurdwaras. Many Gurdwaras rely on religious workers from India, of course, and particularly from Punjab, specifically Granthis. As I say, these are the guys that read from the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. It also affects Raggis, if I've pronounced that correctly. They're the hymn singers, the singers of those religious songs that you hear in Gurdwaras. And the Kathavachaks, again, I hope I pronounced that correctly. And they are generally the guys who sort of preach, who proselytize in the Gurdwaras. And these guys conduct the daily services, the weddings, the funerals, etc. And these roles do require, of course, specialised training and, most importantly, fluency in Gurmukhi, as in the language of the scripts, that's often hard to find locally. Gurdwaras, there are not many people locally in the US, or even diaspora generally, who might be fluent in Gurmukhi that is necessary to be able to read the Holy Scriptures and give the ardas, the prayers, in Gurmukhi. So this helps preserve that. It also, without the RWPA, Gurdwaras are now facing what they're calling a bit of a revolving door crisis. Now, just as a Granthi establishes that bond with the congregation, it's such a key figure, obviously, in the Gurdwaras, and also forms a bit of a focus because he understands the local community needs. And just as he does that, and just as he sort of gets up to speed with the skills in the Gurdwara and gets to know the congregation, the Sangat, their 5-year visa expires. So just as they're getting into the job, they're kicked out because of the backlog. And the Gurdwara is then left without this essential leadership disrupting that cohesion that's so important for the community. They've got to find somebody else and somebody else every sort of cycle this comes around. And many Sikh religious workers, of course, bring their families, forcing them to leave after 5 years, uproots these children from the schools, separates families. Of course, if you're brought in for 5 years and you're kicked out because of a bureaucratic problem, your whole family obviously then gets impacted. They get kicked out, etc. Your kids are forced out of school. Now, this act, of course, provides then the stability needed for these leaders to serve their Sangat without the looming threat of deportation. Excuse me, whilst I have a mouthful of chai. It's a dry day. So you can start to see how important this RWPA, the Religious Workforce Protection Act, is. It basically forms this sort of logistical lifeline for Sikh institutions by ensuring that Granthis and Raggis can remain in the US while the government processes their paperwork. The Act protects the spiritual infrastructure of the Sikh community from being dismantled basically by ICE, by immigration delays, administration, etc. Now, just to highlight and re-highlight the point I said at the beginning, this Act is different from the Workplace Religious Freedom Act, the WRFA. The rights of general Sikh employees, whether you're a truck driver or an engineer or whatever, to wear their articles of faith and beards in secular workplaces, that falls under the WRFA, which is, of course, an extremely important piece of legislation. The RWPA specifically helps professional religious staff at places of worship. So there you go. So I hope that clarifies that. Fingers crossed that Act goes through. But please do get involved in this. Get your signature on that thing. It does all the work for you. You just press sign up and bang, you've added your voice to the clamour to bring in that new act. Okay, Let's move on. Now, this is quite a big story, actually. I talked on Friday last week. I did an editorial, a really powerful editorial, as it turned out. It had a huge impact on out there in the audience, and it was a viral video. It's now being called the 200 Sikh rescue, as it seems to have sort of gained this viral title. And basically, it was a story, as many of you hopefully have seen this video, refer back to my editorial last Friday about grooming gangs here in the UK. It is about a small extremist element of the Islamic community who have been grooming young girls. It started off with Sikh girls and even Hindu girls, but particularly Sikh girls in the 1970s. And then it grew as they got away with it. They expanded their evil operation into targeting young girls from all communities, including the white community. And it wasn't until they started targeting the white community did the British government and law enforcement actually start to pay attention to it. But it took them years, decades, to do anything about it. And that's the key message, really, that came out of that editorial I did. Now, what happened for those who didn't see that video, but please do go watch that video if you want more context and background and see the videos themselves. A band of Sikhs, particularly Sher Punjab, went and rescued a young girl. She was originally 14 when she was groomed by an Afghan man, actually. He was an Islamic gentleman from, I won't use the word gentleman, he's not a gentleman, he's a man. An Afghan from who lived in Hounslow. He groomed a girl from the age of 14, a Sikh girl from the age of 14, and she's now 16. And her family couldn't do anything about it. Social services just basically did nothing. Social services, that's our state entity that's supposed to protect our young. They just said, well, as long as she goes home at night to her family, we won't do anything about it. The police turned a blind eye. They did nothing about it. The British government, who've been knowing this has been going on for decades, have done nothing about it. Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, has done absolutely nothing about it. And he himself was in charge, was responsible for pursuing the grooming gangs legally when he was Director of Public Prosecutions and didn't do it. He turned a blind eye. Our own Prime Minister turned a blind eye, as he seems to be doing now. Anyway, I don't want to get into too much of that, but that is all relevant. That context is relevant because the message is now coming out from the Sikh community. Look, the police are doing nothing about this. The government is doing nothing about this. We have to do something about this because nobody else seems to care. I mean, I do. The wider community does. White people care about it. But of course, the Sikh community care about it because it's our young girls, whether you're a Sikh girl or a white girl. It doesn't matter. If you're an underage girl, these girls are being groomed by these gangs. And nobody in positions of power is doing about it. In other words, we ourselves have no choice but to turn into vigilantes to do something about this, to go and rescue these girls from the clutches of these evil paedophiles. It has fallen on us to do something about it. It has fallen on groups like Sikh Youth UK, on groups like Sher Punjab, on groups like the SAS, and that's not the British military SAS, that Sikhs Awareness Society. It is these groups who have formed the vigilante sharp end, the vanguard. They are the warriors. In fact, I even titled that video, The Warriors of Guruji. They are basically the warriors of good against this evil, who have had no choice but to take the law into their own hands and to go out on literally bang on the doors of these paedophiles and rescue these girls from their grip. Now, interestingly, this story did go viral. It went around the world. And very significantly, two Sikh leaders, they're revered Khalistan resistance fighters, Paramjit Singh Bora and Jagtar Singh Tara. These are two very well-known characters in the Punjab, in prison in Punjab. They have issued a rallying call to all Sikhs to stand against targeted grooming of Sikh females and to support groups like Sikh Youth UK, Sher Punjab UK, in their efforts against the issue. Now, these two guys are political prisoners. They were imprisoned a few years ago, some years ago. I'll give a little background in a moment. But these prisoners issued this statement after this viral video of what happened in Hounslow went around the world. Even these guys in prison in India saw this video. This is how important the story's come. And it shows, firstly, how important the message is, but secondly, the message that's come from these guys is really important. And what they've said, that I'd sort of flick through my sort of notes here because I want to just pick out some of the key points, the important points. But the crowd that turned up in Hounslow were obviously very frustrated by police inaction, so they had no choice but to take the matters into their own hands. But the ripples of this event travelled even right across the world to India. Now, this display of vigilantism has reportedly drawn this, I would say, quite a rare but very powerful intervention from these two guys. And both men are currently serving life sentences for their roles in the 1995 assassination of Punjab Chief Minister Beant Singh. So, of course, this followed. Beant Singh was one of the key figures in the extrajudicial murders of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of young Sikhs in the 1980s and 1990s. So as an act of vengeance, these two guys murdered him, and justifiably so. If you're a Sikh and you suffered under his reign, then you totally justify this assassination of that Chief Minister of Punjab, who was responsible for mass murder. So again, this is all about vigilantism. You can see the common theme here, taking the law into their own hands because nobody else is protecting the Sikh community. So the Sikh community has to protect themselves. So these two guys are serving their sentences for that revenge killing. And they're also, ironically, interestingly, known for their escape from the Peril jail in 2004. They dug a tunnel, an amazing an escape from the maximum security jail. Anyway, but they still remain symbols of militant resistance for a large part of the Sikh community. Now, they've issued this statement, and I want to go through this statement again because it just shows how important this story is as a whole and the theme that's coming out. And it's been released through their legal counsel, and it's been addressed to the Khalsa of Hounslow. The message frames what happened in Hounslow, this sort of rescue. It's not just a simple crime story, but more of a theological and political victory, but also a political message and a theological message. There is a spiritual, Sikhi message to this. Now, Bure and Tara often, they remain silent about many issues for many years, but they have said something on this particular issue, and this again highlights how important it is. And they've seized their moment to issue a directive to the Panthic, on the Panthic sovereignty in the West. And this letter, and let me just quickly, I'll just give you a few, just a flavour of how this has been reported. There's been all sorts of press releases on this. You can see the two guys there. You can see all this. It's all in Punjabi. But I'll show the first one because I have, through the magic of technology, despite the fact I don't speak more than about 2 words of Punjabi, I have actually managed to translate this. So I'll read for those who don't speak Punjabi. This is what this one says. In the UK, a Sikh girl was raped by a grooming gang along with 5 or 6 acquaintances, which is very worrying and extremely sad. These views were expressed by Paranjit Singh Bayer and Bai K during a meeting with his family members in Peril jail, who said that grooming gangs have been active in the UK for the past few years, and every time some unpleasant incident committed by them keeps making headlines in the newspapers. It's also a matter of concern that the UK government has not taken any steps on this issue, especially despite the presence of Sikh and Punjabi MPs in the UK Parliament, while some of the incidents that took place in the past had led to large-scale protests and protest marches in the UK. He said that we appeal to all Sikh federations, Sikh organisations and all British Sikhs that this is a very serious issue, and while expressing solidarity on this issue, to organise special camps for Sikhs and Punjabi families living in the UK at all Gurdwaras in Britain and at other appropriate places to combat the grooming gangs, in which they should be given complete information about the activities of the grooming gangs, so that no other unpleasant incidents can happen in the future. That word unpleasant, I think, is probably lost in translation. It's probably a bit stronger than that. He said that the support of Sikh Youth UK, through a friend of this show, Bhai Deepa Singh, an organisation of young Sikhs working on this issue, can also be sought, and a special effort should be made to teach the martial art Gatka, interesting, which is being developed all over the world. Now, there is a bit of subtext here, and I want to give a slightly different interpretation, slightly less diplomatic than what's across here, but a clear warning signal to us here in the West to wake up. And this subtext is more like that the governments of the West, like the governments of the East, won't protect our daughters at all. The 200 Singhs in Hounslow didn't just rescue a child, they rescued the honour of the Panth. This is the Khalsa's true jurisdiction. So this message coming from these two guys is a bit more subliminal and a bit more powerful. It's saying that we call upon the youth of the diaspora, Don't wait for the law of the land, which is blind to our pain, but to form jathas, that's organised groups, of protection in every city. Hounslow is not an incident, it is a blueprint. Now, blueprint for what, you may ask? This is what this subliminal subtext is. This intervention by the two Singhs is significant because it attempts to bridge a gap between what happened in the 1980s and 1990s in Punjab, the armed struggle, the militant sort of uprising, this act of defence, self-defence effectively, to protect the community. It bridges what happened then with this modern struggle of Sikhs here in the UK. By endorsing what happened in Hounslow, by essentially agreeing and supporting it, Bure and Tara are effectively attempting to deputise the diaspora, encouraging it to move away from a dependence, this sort of reliance on British police, the British government, for the protection, towards a different model, a model of self-governance, a model of self-defence. And how often have I sadly had to say, even recently, over and over and over again, the Sikh community is now having to take care of itself, to protect itself, because the British state is clearly not interested in doing so. So this message from these two guys, it's not just a message for the UK, it's actually a message for the whole diaspora. Now, for the authorities in the UK, such a message like this should be alarming. It's a warning signal. It's a signal of the potential organisation of vigilante groups, but blessed by convicted militants. So on the face of it, it seems it's a warning signal. Look, if you don't act, British government, if you, the British police, don't do something about this, there is no choice but for vigilante groups to form. We're already seeing this right across London, for example, and other cities where vigilante groups are having to be formed to protect our society, not even Sikh society, wider society, because law and order is breaking down here in the UK. The government is not protecting our citizens. The British police, bless them, are trying their best, but they're not resourced well enough. The political will is not there at senior management to protect our society. The poor guys on the street, the average bobby, as we call them, the average cop on the street, is probably pulling his hair out in frustration because they don't have the support of their senior management, who are politicised, ultimately ruled by the Home Secretary, our useless Yvette Cooper, and ultimately Keir Starmer. Where is the will? Where is the political will to protect British Sikhs? Where is the political will to protect Canadian Sikhs, US Sikhs, Sikhs across Europe, Australia, New Zealand? Look at the Nagar Curtain as an example of that, but bless the New Zealand police, they were there on the ground. But you start to see a pattern here. And this is a warning to the British government and British police, sent from two prisoners in India, two Sikhs in India. Watch out, wake up, that these vigilante groups are being formed because we have no choice. You're not protecting us, so we'll have to protect ourselves. This endorsement validates the frustration of Sikhs with our system that they feel has failed them. It's turned the events of Hounslow, that was just a little local rescue, into an act of international solidarity. And that is important because this is galvanising, ironically, a wider feeling of self-determination. It's evolving from we must protect ourselves to we must make our own decisions. We must have self-determination. We must have control over our own future. And of course, I'm talking about Khalistan. So all this is galvanising support for Khalistan, which is great. Ironically, I always look for the silver linings in these things. And the silver lining is, yeah, we are going to have to protect ourselves because the state is failing us. Ultimately, we want to build a new state that is there to protect us. And again, that is a bigger message. So you can start to see why this message has become so important from these two guys from their prison cell in India. I'll leave it there. Right, let's move on. And let's talk about an article that appeared in Baz News. Now, this article this is an article that appeared a couple of days ago. And it's about British Columbia and what's happening in British Columbia. And it created a bit of a furore. That's another word for a lot of angry reaction across, particularly the Sikh community in British Columbia. Because their premier, this guy, David Eby, is leading a trade mission and has led over recent days a trade mission to India. And Baz News has written, again, another powerful article. I'm not going to go through it. I'm not going to read it out. I'm not even going to cherry pick it, but I'm just going to basically, in the theme of what I've just been talking about, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to summarise what the article is about, but also bring in the overall theme of self-protection. Because, again, this story is highlighting this common theme that Sikhs globally are now having to protect themselves, having to form, essentially, these vigilante groups. But basically, they are having to form a ring of protection around themselves because guys like David Eby isn't doing it for them. Guys like Mark Carney isn't doing it for them. Again, you can start to see the pattern. Keir Starmer, Mark Carney, these WEF, World Economic Forum stooges, they've got a bigger agenda that they're interested in. That agenda doesn't include protecting their Sikh communities. It doesn't matter how positive, how contributory, how good the Sikh communities are in their own national communities. They don't care. They've got bigger agenda. That bigger agenda always revolves around the dollar, money, commerce, profit, etc. The human rights that are being abused, both at home, interestingly, through transnational repression, and of course in India, they don't care about that. They just care about a 1.4 billion person commercial market, a lucrative market of India. That's all they care about. So unsurprisingly, there's been a lot of reaction to this. And Baz News, as it always does, it always writes the contributors. In this case, it's Fateh Singh has contributed, again, yet another wonderful article in Baz News. Do go on to Baz News periodically. They do produce some really great, very well thought out, very intelligent articles on current affairs. But I just want to summarise in the context of, again, Hounslow, what this article is bringing out, and again, bringing out some of the common things. Now, it does talk about David Eby's recent trade mission to India, and it talks about how it has ignited this firestorm of controversy, highlighting a deepening rift between making money and, of course, the protection of the Sikh diaspora. So as this mission concludes, and it's now sort of coming to an end, the conversation that's surrounding it provides a useful example of the limits of political engagement when weighed against allegations of transnational repression. So the primary objective of the visit was pretty obvious. It was to diversify BC, British Columbia's trade portfolio. Now, of course, Canada is facing aggressive tariff threats and economic volatility from south of its border from Trump. But Eby has pitched BC's mining, its clean technology and its natural gas sectors to Indian conglomerates, the big organisations in India like Tata and Reliance. Now, from a local standpoint, from BC's standpoint, the mission actually made sense. It was a sensible response to this trade war that Trump's waging on Canada. And it's aimed at protecting the standard of living for British Columbians. So you can see why he does it. You know, he's got a perfectly sensible defence to his visit. However, it's the timing of this trip that is actually a little bit painful because many in the Sikh community see it obviously as a betrayal. The visit occurred while the investigation into the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar is still ongoing. And that killing remains a really important central point of tension between Ottawa and New Delhi. And of course, for the Sikh diaspora, Eby's presence in Delhi is seen as a normalisation of relations with a government that itself, its own government, is accusing Canadian federal law enforcement is accusing that very same government of being involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. So again, why on earth is the diaspora thinking, why on earth are you visiting the very government and shaking the hands of the very government who killed one of our citizens? Now, for those Sikhs in BC, particularly the lower mainland area, the trade mission is not just about foreign policy, it's a matter of domestic safety. And of course, I'm talking about transnational repression. The community is currently facing what many describe as an epidemic of extortion and violence, something that we report regularly about that's going on in BC. Recent RCMP, that's the Canadian Mounted Police, recent reports have unambiguously linked the Lawrence Bishnoi gang to Indian government agents, alleging they carry out intimidation and targeted attacks against the diaspora in Canada, even in Eby's own province. So it's known, it's proved. The RCMP have informed the government, as per the leaked report I reported on last week, that it is the Bishnoi gang linked to the Indian government. So there's no ambiguity there. And protests at the BC legislature featured slogans like business over blood, signalling that for many, economic gain cannot come at the expense of justice. The Sikh community, in Surrey particularly, which holds significant electoral power, there's a lot of Sikhs there, has warned that the NDP's haste to please a right-wing Hindu nationalist government will be remembered at the ballot box. So that is a democratic warning to people like Ebi. You are democratically accountable. If you continue to do this, you're going to be kicked out, so be warned. Now, excuse me, Ebi's defence that criminal trials and foreign policy are federal responsibilities. These slopey shoulders, as we call it. He said, not my problem. It's a federal problem. It's nothing to do with our state, with BC. It's not my problem. His defence has been criticised as a bit of an attempt to compartmentalise the inextricable. In other words, you are involved, whether you like it or not. You do have a stake in this. You can't just brush it off and say it's a federal responsibility. It's Mark Carney's responsibility. No, it is inextricably linked to the politics of BC, and you, as Premier, you basically have a responsibility for this. Critics argue that a subnational government and the BC Premier can't ignore the security of its own constituents while going overseas looking for investment from the very state accused of threatening its own people. So, now, the Hounslow 200 Sikhs Rescue, as it's been called, event, and the ongoing advocacy, for example, Jagtar Singh Johal in the UK, it's starting to highlight a bit of a global trend here. The Sikh diaspora is increasingly adopting a stance of self-reliance and community sovereignty in the face of perceived state inaction. In other words, basically what this article is one of the things of this article comes back to what I was saying, is that there is this global trend now that the diaspora is having to become more self-reliant to protect itself, what it calls community sovereignty. Again, you can start to see how it evolves into the pro-Khalistan movement. Now, the Baz News analysis suggests that Ebi's mission serves as a prism for the wider global Sikh experience. It reflects a growing consensus, agreement among diasporas around the whole Western democracies that traditional political lobbying has basically reached its limit. When Western leaders prioritise trade with India, despite all the transnational repression, all the evidence that's been presented to them, it reinforces the belief in the diaspora that their safety doesn't matter. It's secondary. It's a secondary concern to a bigger strategy of the leaders. In other words, the leaders are looking at more important things in their view: trade, geopolitical strategy, etc. So the overarching message is one of contradiction. Now, Ebi returns with potential deals for BC's resources, but he leaves behind a fractured, damaged relationship with one of the province's most influential communities. The mission has forced a public debate on whether trade can truly be values neutral, as it's called. For the global Sikh diaspora, what happened in Hounslow and the opposition to Ebi's mission are two sides of the same thing. A community that's basically saying if the state doesn't provide security and justice, the community itself will mobilise to protect itself. That is the key message. That's an important message that's come out of this. So again, you can start to see how these things are all sort of tying together now. It all makes sense. The message to our government and the message coming out of the Baz News article is this: maybe our political advocacy has reached its limit. I often talk about the grassroots movement and how important that is that we must keep lobbying our politicians to make policy change, to benefit the community, to bring in laws to protect the community. But Baz News is arguing, have we reached the limit? Have we reached the point where they're just not listening anymore? And it doesn't matter how much we lobby politically. Maybe our voice in the diaspora is so small, proportionately speaking, that we can't do any more than that is being done already. That the forces of the globalists, those who are trying to tie up these trade deals with India, who are brushing the human rights issue under the carpet, who are ignoring the transnational oppression, maybe those forces are just too strong for us to take on. Maybe those forces domestically, whether it's the UK, whether it's Canada, whether it's Australia, those forces are now so in control that it doesn't matter how much political lobbying we do, we cannot change their policies. Therefore, it is beholden on our own communities to protect ourselves, because they're not going to do it for us. It's a big question. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, because Yeah, it's a dangerous situation to be in, and certainly here in the UK, and I guess it's the same in North America, Australia, Europe, etc., New Zealand. Our laws are there to prevent vigilantism. There is a contract, a social contract, between us, the people, and those we elect to lead us, and our police forces, our law enforcement entities. There is a social contract whereby we elect them and give them this power on the understanding, the contractual understanding, that you will protect us, that you will bring in laws, create laws to protect our society, to allow our society to function in a civilised, law-abiding manner, to protect all of us for the common good. That contract breaks down when young girls are groomed by these Islamic gangs. That contract breaks down when our citizens in the Sikh community are murdered on their sovereign soil outside of India. The assassination plots happen in the United States against Khalistani campaigners like Gurdwara Granthis and so on. That contract is breaking down. If the contract breaks down, anybody who knows the law of contract, I'm very familiar with it, if the contract is breached, you then have a right to take action. You have a legal right to take action. And that is the argument that is now developing, that if you won't protect us, we will take the law into our own hands. Now, in practical terms, of course, certainly here in the UK, and I know in North America they'll do the same, vigilante gangs will be criminalised, so be careful. And this is not a provocation to go out there and form vigilante gangs. Don't do that. But ultimately, it is asking the question, and sadly, vigilante gangs are having to be formed because of this. Sher Punjab, Sikh Youth UK, SAS, all these groups are having now to take direct action because that social contract is breaking down. And this is a warning to our governments, whether it is Trump, whether it is Carney, whether it is Starmer, whether it is Albanese, or, forgive me, I forget the New Zealand's governor. This is a warning to you guys. Protect your Sikh community. Otherwise, the consequences are significant and they are dangerous. But ultimately, as I keep saying, the silver lining to all this, it is generating a feeling towards self-autonomy. It is generating this feeling of self-determination. If we have reached the limit of political advocacy, if our peaceful, democratic campaigning does not achieve the end, we will achieve it through a different way. The establishment of Khalistan, again, becomes vital, because ultimately it is only the establishment of Khalistan that can form a sovereign nation that will allow the Sikh community and others who would like to join and align with it, who want to live there. It gives them a sanctuary, a protected society that will benefit those who understand the unique benefits that democracy and the rule of law bring, the unique benefits that Sikh theology bring, the benefits, the morality, the social structure that Sikh brings of human goodness. That will be found in a nation like Khalistan. That is why all of us must fight for the establishment of a sovereign Sikh nation, because only there, genuinely, will that government model be established to protect the people of Khalistan under the beliefs that we all believe in, the moral principles that we all believe in, that align whether you are, ironically, a Hindu, a Sikh, a Muslim, a Christian, a Jain. It doesn't matter. Even an atheist. We all, if you're a good human being, we all align with basic human nature, the goodness of humanity. That essentially is what Sikh follows, creates. It forms that structure. And that is what Khalistan will be ruled by. All will be welcome if you are a good person, if you align with those values. So that is why we must continue to fight for the sovereign nation of Khalistan. There you go. On that note, let us move on to our comments column. And the comments, gosh, after that show last Friday, good heavens, that generated a lot of comments and a lot of feedback. Most of it, I have to say, thoroughly aligned along the same sort of ideals. TC, one of our regulars, kicked us off. Again, this was an important message, and I didn't think I highlighted this sufficiently during the show, and apologies for this. And thank you to TC for making this point really on my behalf. We must be clear. Grooming in general isn't just restricted to this small community of extremists in the Islamic community. It's actually, there are many others, sadly, who are involved in grooming. it is a particular problem in the UK that it is Islamic grooming gangs. First of all, we do not paint all Muslims with that same brush. Of course, all Muslims are not groomers. That is a very obvious distinction. It is a very small part of evil men in the Islamic community who are responsible for this. So we're not painting all Muslims with the same brush. There are many millions of good Muslims out there. But also, groomers are not just specifically and exclusively Islamic. There are groomers amongst other communities as well. So thank you, TC, basically, for pointing that out. And it's important that we highlight that to our children. In other words, watch out, because it's not just Islamic groomers who might come after you. It might be white groomers. It might be groomers from all sorts of communities. In other words, just always be alert. So, Tambriaz Sadi, beg your pardon. There's a bit of a circular argument, and again, it makes the same sort of argument here, is that all demographics from all spheres of the economy potentially could be involved in this. But ultimately, it's structural failures in leadership. Now, this is another common theme that came in through a lot of these comments. It's a failure of leadership from top to bottom. And key words here, through collusion, complicity, impunity, co-option. Again, this follows a lot of comments where they're saying, look, there's collusion going on. There are people in positions of power who know this is going on, and some of them are possibly even involved in it. Epstein scandal, remember? Yeah. Complicity, they are complicit in it. Impunity, they get away with it, they're not being punished. Co-option, they're cooperating, they're partnering, they're helping, assisting. So very, very important point that. Watch out, because these people have connections. The groomers, the paedophiles have connections in power. That is why they're protected. Jimmy Savile, for those in the UK, remember Jimmy Savile, a prime example of that. Alpha Centauri, fear of being seen as being racist, plus some men of a certain persuasion have slithered up the ladder into key positions of power. So again, the same point. People, we know this is going on. Satnam Khalsa, same point. Trade comes before morals and public. The UK government is really weak now. They're all career politicians. I couldn't put it better myself, Satnam. Absolutely. Our governments are failing. They care more about trade, money, dollars. Jagtar Sidhu widens the scope of all this. Please, God, protect our children from these monsters. The same thing happened, remind us, in Delhi, the genocide. There were awful gang rapes and how women became the targets of gang rapes and sexual assaults. Dreadful assaults that happened in November 1984 after the assassination of Indira Gandhi. So he brings in, again, this wider threat of the Brahmins and also the wider vulnerability of women. And again, a few people did comment about how women in India are also vulnerable to these sorts of attacks. Again, it's our vulnerable in our society that we, all of us, particularly the Sikh community and these vigilante gangs, we all must protect the vulnerable females in our society of whatever age, not just children, but even adults who are vulnerable. 2 rapes, for example, here in the Midlands in the UK in recent months that were hate crimes. Vulnerable women who were attacked by these evil men. Amrit Saravar, wow, Sikhs are not safe. The children aren't safe anywhere in the world now. Again, this message from Hounslow spreads globally. Our children are not safe anywhere. Actually, it's not just children, per the previous point. Our women are not safe anywhere. So we must rally round, protect our women. Surjit Singh Pabla, she is a Sikh young girl. Why should you say British girl? Now, this is an interesting nuance. I referred to this girl as being a British girl. Yes, she is both a Sikh and a British Sikh. Now, I might be wrong there in that this girl herself, or at least her family, may say, no, we're not British. I believe they are. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but forgive me for speaking on behalf of the family, but I am pretty certain this family sees themselves as British, and that young girl is a British girl. She is a Sikh, but she is also British. She is one of us. Her family are loyal. Again, I'm making presumptions here, but I'm, again, confident in my presumptions. That family sees itself as a loyal British family, but they are also Sikhs. That is why our Sikh community here in the UK have contributed and are so well respected and loved, deeply loved by the British people. The white people love our Sikh community as a generalisation because they see them as good, powerful, but loyal, integrated, fully integrated British citizens. God bless them, is essentially how white people see our Sikh community. I think even I've got some comments along these lines. So stay tuned to Surjit Singh Babla if you want some confirmation of that. A long comment from Tabriaz Sadiq. Again, it just highlights, and I'm not obviously going to read it, it's a long one this, but basically these cohorts of paedophiles, of child groomers, are integrated in our whole society, whether it's the judicial bar council, the penal probation system, snooker halls, cafes, coffee shops, shisha lounges, banqueting suites, etc., etc. This is the danger. They're everywhere. They are amongst us. My Akita 13 says, again, highlights the point. The police and the government are too scared of doing anything about it. It's effing disgusting. It is. They're scared of losing votes or being called a racist as Muslim men groom, traffic and exploit our girls. Yeah, and this is the problem with Starmer's government. They have a large Muslim vote. They essentially got into power largely because they have a large Muslim following, a large part of the electorate who put them into power are Muslims. So they're doing everything to protect their Muslim community, even the groomers, the paedophiles. That's Starmer for you. That is Starmer's government. That is his MPs who know they've got to protect these men to stay in power. How evil is that? So remember, next time you vote for Labour, you're voting for a party that protects paedophiles, that is even resisting a public inquiry into the grooming gangs. Watch my video from last week if you want to know more about that. And Satnam Khalsa sums it up. Starmer has failed on many levels. Not on many levels. I think he's failed on every level. The most unpopular Prime Minister in British history. For a good reason. He's effing useless. He's incompetent. But Daljit follows up with an interesting comment. No, the establishment has failed. They haven't failed on this. They've actually achieved what they're up to. The obfuscation and obstruction. That means blurring the issue, hiding it, and demonising anyone who dared raise their heads to this evil. Thankfully, some sons of Guru Gobind Singh Ji didn't back down, nor will they. So this is really conspiratorial, and I don't disagree with this. There is an establishment stitch-up going on here in the UK. The deep state, as it's called in the US, same issue. They're protecting their own. They know that the paedophiles are operating in our society. They protect them. So they've achieved what they're aiming to do, is obfuscate, to hide what's going on, to protect their own, to protect those involved in these sorts of scandals. Epstein, as a prime example, if you want to know how these people protect each other, look at the Epstein scandal. Here we go, Critics Corner makes a rampant return. Tip Top, he's not even got the facts, there's no rape. The lies won't stop. Oh dear, really? So I guess your point, Tip Top, is this girl wasn't raped. I beg to differ on that one. This girl was groomed by this guy from the age of 14. She's basically lived with this guy for 2 years. A 34-year-old Afghan man with a 14-year-old girl living, sharing a bedroom. What do you think happened? Now, if your distinction is saying it was consensual, I hate to disappoint you, mate, but there is no such thing as consensual sex between a 14-year-old girl and an adult. That is called rape. It is called statutory rape. Any sexual act that an adult performs with an underage girl, that is under 16, is by legal definition rape. There is no black and white. There is no ambiguity. It is rape. R-A-P-E. And for that, you go to prison, rightly so. So unfortunately, Tip Top, it is a fact. It is rape. It is called statutory rape. That is why the guy was arrested. So in other words, if you disagree with me, disagree with the British police, because they have arrested him, and I believe they're charging him with statutory rape. Paul Shin, since when does the picture at the back represent Sikhism? Whoever chose this hasn't got a clue about Sikhism. Are you talking about Bhindranwale ji? I suspect you are. Oh dear. Well, unfortunately, Paul Shin, I don't know if you are a Sikh yourself. That doesn't seem to be a Sikhi name. But even if you are a Sikh, clearly you have a very different view of Sikhi than I have learnt over the last few years. And I dare say our audience might have a few comments on that. Let me know. Am I wrong? Is this picture not representing Sikhism? The picture that appears in every Gurdwara around the world, as advocated by the SGPC? And if those words are alien to you, Paul Shin, I suggest you go away and learn what Sikhi is all about and who Bhindranwale was about, what he represented, and why his picture hangs in every single Gurdwara around the world. Interesting one, that. Maybe I've misinterpreted your question or your comment. Let me know if I've got you wrong. And the final set. Little Wren. Yeah, contact Rupert Lowe. He's trying to save the British leader. He's trying to save. He's a British leader of a new party. He may help if possible. The government blocked UK British. He pushed. Okay, it's a bit broken English, but basically, the theme of this comment. Thank you, Little Wren. Rupert Lowe is a very right wing MP in the United Kingdom. He represents the constituency of Great Yarmouth on the East Coast, which has had a huge immigrant problem. He has been elected as an MP. Basically on the back of his anti-immigration stance. I actually have to say I quite like Rupert Lowe. He's a very divisive figure. I like him because he's not afraid. He's one of the few MPs who doesn't toe any political party line. And there are very few MPs who are like him, who speak their mind, who really stand up for the principles. Now, you might not agree with his principles. You might completely disagree with them. But you've got to admit, he does stand up for his principles. And that is why he was elected. And he is profoundly anti-grooming gangs. He is very outspoken on this. Rupert Lowe, he's got bigger issues, and I know I've actually met Rupert Lowe in the past. He does actually have his own bigger issues to deal with. But yeah, it's an interesting thought, and he certainly is one MP. He is an independent MP. In other words, he's not part of any party. He originally was part of the Reform Party. He is now kicked out of the Reform Party because his views were too extreme, interestingly. And for those who think the Reform Party are extreme fascists, they're not. Please read their manifesto. And that is why they kicked Rupert Lowe out, because he was it's not far right, he is right wing, but he's on that sharper end of the right wing, let's say. So anyway, thank you for the suggestion. Hello, Timbuktu. A very good overview of what's been happening, how terrible the authorities have been to bring this to justice. God bless the Sikh activists. This is the bit I wanted to highlight. God bless the Sikh activists. Yes, indeed. Thank God for the likes of Sheer Punjab, for Sikh Youth UK, for these groups that are out there on the front line, because otherwise these young girls would still be there being raped daily by these evil men. So thank God for these guys who have the courage, the will, the inconvenience in their lives to get out there and go rescue these girls. And all of us support you in that. Please keep doing it. Please keep protecting our young girls, our vulnerable, from these evil men, from these evil hands of these people. Please keep doing what you're doing, because clearly the state is failing us. So you guys, we're all looking at you guys. We're all supporting you guys to get out there. Don't obviously cross the line of the law, but keep doing what you're doing, like you did in Hounslow. A great example of legal activism, banging on this guy's door, which ultimately led to his arrest. But that is being forced upon us to do it because the police aren't doing it, much as I'm sure they would like to do it. Here you go. Colin Ballantyne. They, that's the Sikhs, fought for us in the wars. Good people. John Truth. Again, I guess these two guys are white guys. Bravo. Sikhs and everyone else is sick of it. Never mess with a Sikh. They are the ultimate revengeists against every wrong. Indeed they are. The phrase I often use is Sikhs make better friends than they make enemies. Don't make an enemy of a Sikh, because by heavens, they certainly are the ultimate revengeists. Indira Gandhi might have a few post-mortem words on that one to confirm that, as many others do. Bhagwant Singh, the Chief Minister, the assassinated Chief Minister of Punjab, likewise, they fell at the hands of the ultimate revengeists, the Sikh community. But ultimately, and I refer back to an earlier show I did a few weeks ago, a viral video of a lady and her daughter in a cafe, I think it was in London, who approached a Sikh couple having a cup of tea and just spent 2 minutes just saying, bless you guys. I was always told by my father, if I was ever in trouble as a girl, go find a Sikh, they will protect you. And that is the prevailing, and again, refer back to Critics' Corner, the guy who had a go at Sikhs or whatever. The Sikhs are viewed by the white community, generally speaking, here in the UK, as good people. They fought for us in the wars. 83,000 Sikhs gave their lives for us, for the Commonwealth, for democracy, for the West. Never mess with a Sikh, because if you do, God help you. Because he's about the only person who can. Sukhwant Singh. Thank you, Angus. You're an awesome reporter. I don't know why I put that in. It's a bit sort of self-congratulatory. All I would say in defence of that is apologies. But yes, I think I'm not an awesome reporter. I'm just doing what I can, my small voice, to add to a community that I deeply, deeply support and believe in. And they're doing such great work. And I just wish that more white people would actually just follow the principles of Sikh. You don't even have to be a Sikh to follow the principles, because those principles are principles that we seem to be losing outside the Sikh community. And I think we all need to be drawn back into alignment with those beliefs. It speaks for itself. Baldev Moha. Good job, Angus. True reporter and proud of you. Yeah, I know I brought this one up because B.K. Hara says, he's Scott. This is a common misconception. My name is Angus Scott. Americans call me Scott. English people call me Angus. Because Scott is a Christian name. It's a first name in America. So I'm often called Scott. Actually, Scott is my family name, my surname. My first name is Angus. So B.K. Hara, thank you. I get called both. And you know what? It doesn't matter. I know that you're referring to me. So you can call me Scott, you can call me Angus. I've been called a lot worse. So I'll take either of those. Thank you. And the final comment of the show goes to Paramjit Singh. Khalistan Zindabad. Indeed. And again, referring back to the earlier stories. Khalistan is so important to set out a stage, a platform, a national sovereign platform that we need in this world. We need an example nation to lead this globe back into moral alignment. The world is losing itself. The world is morally falling apart in so many areas. There has been an insidious infiltration of evil into humanity over recent years. Maybe arguably it's always been there. Christians would call it satanic. Brian Tamaki, the lunatic cult leader, would say it's the forces of Satan. But ultimately, there are forces of badness, of human evil, whatever you want to call it, whether it's driven by Satan or whether it's just inherent in our genes. The only solution to bringing the world back into moral alignment, into human goodness, is a nation of Khalistan. It needs a beacon, an example of goodness, of how human society can develop and exist with all the goodness that Sikhi brings. That is why we must keep fighting for Khalistan. There is all the geopolitical arguments, the economic arguments, the social arguments, etc. But ultimately, it just comes down to the simple concept of human goodness and human kindness. That is what Khalistan will represent. That is why we need all of us to align and support this whole movement. So please, whenever you can, get involved. Let's get Khalistan over the line. Let's get global leaders into understanding what it would bring the world and how importantly powerful it would be to take humanity forward into the 21st century, a century which at the moment seems to be going slightly skewed, slightly off alignment. We need to bring humanity back into the right direction. That is what Khalistan will bring. Khalistan Zindabad. Keep your comments coming. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your opinions. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about. Don't forget, you can, of course, message me directly. I do read all your emails at message@satluj.tv.com. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your perspectives. But that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. Do tune in tomorrow. Thank you for your loyalty. Thank you for your comments. Do let me know your comments below. But that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. It is a goodbye from me. I will, God willing, see you tomorrow.